Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Amanda Shields, an occupational therapist based in Adelaide with a passion for pain management, virtual reality therapy, mental health, and ways technology and innovation can support well-being and transform clinical practice. One of the reasons I started this podcast is because I love having conversations with people who just think differently, who are challenging the status quo and helping to shape the future of therapy and healthcare. Today's episode is one I'm really looking forward to because we're diving into the rapidly evolving world of AI and allied health. It's a topic that's generating a huge amount of curiosity, excitement, uncertainty, and debate. And joining me today is Jess Francis. Jess is an occupational therapist and an innovation strategist based in Sydney who works at the intersection of allied health and technology. Through her company, The Training Club, she supports clinicians, practices, and health technology ventures to integrate AI in ways that are practical, ethical, and sustainable. Jess and I have originally connected through our shared interest in AI and virtual reality therapy, and I've really enjoyed our conversations around where technology is heading and what that could mean for clinicians and clients alike. So in today's conversation, we're going to be exploring how AI is already being used across allied health, some of the opportunities and potential benefits for clinicians, some of the common fears and misconceptions surrounding AI, and some of those ethical and privacy considerations that we are often talking about, and some practical ways that clinicians can start engaging with AI in their practices. And I'm really keen to also hear where Jess believes AI and some of these emerging technologies are heading in the future. So, Jess, thank you for joining me today. I'd love to start by getting you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your background, how you got into it, and the work that you're doing. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda, for having me. And I think I just love your introduction of yourself because it speaks so much to all the things I love and hold dear to me, which probably is why we're such good friends. So hello, everyone. I'm Jess Francis. I am an occupational therapist by background. I've spent most of my career working in in the private sectors, but also in leadership. So went into leadership pretty early on, I reckon, Amanda, kind of 5 years in. Gosh, that makes me feel old if that's ancient history. And then had the benefit or the great opportunity to build and scale an allied health business for an old boss. So I was there day one, employee number one, sort of built that up to 200 staff. And by the end, I was managing it as the chief operations officer. Which really gave me startup taste, which is something that if you know, you know, it's one of those things, but also the experience across really the breadth of running an allied health practice. So from being small to being big to the growing pains, managing budgets, quality, people, all of those things. Yeah, it was a lot, but it was great. I loved it.
Amazing experience.
Yeah. And after that, I left to run my own private practice. So, again, being super tiny, and then kind of muddled into the world of tech. But the tech world was always in my veins from day one. So, as a kid, my dad worked for IBM. And so we had a computer before anyone else I knew had a computer. We loved playing computer games, still do, to be honest. We had PlayStation, all the things back.
Yeah.
Makes me sound ancient. Anyway, so all throughout my career, I've been implementing technology. So admittedly, I apologized to my boss, who I have since met and apologized to. But as a new grad, I was so annoying in that I would bug them to say, can I use a computer? Can I use a tablet? Can I do anything? We had these manila folders, which I'm sure you remember, for file notes. And I was really bad at keeping on top of my file notes. And I was just looking at my computer like, surely we could do this better. Thankfully, they eventually gave in and gave me an Aldi tablet, I think, to do notes. And that kind of theme followed through my career until I kind of started to find where I fit, because I never really thought that I fit in the typical OT world. Whilst I was the COO of that company, another old boss, or past boss, I suppose, organised this linkage with one of the local universities. And so we had the opportunity to do a research degree. And so at the time, I was also working in disability employment. Gosh, it sounds very convoluted. Anyway, and I was thinking about the complex issue that some of our young people with disability have where they can't get a job because they don't have experience, but they can't get experience because they can't get a job. Add on to that their disability related challenges for whoever they are and whatever they're experiencing. And I thought, if I think about young autistic people who are in this environment, can't get a job because they don't have experience, can't get experience because they don't have a job. Add to that, there are many jobs that might not be suitable for those individuals for certain reasons. My research topic then ended up being virtual reality. So my thesis was, well, if we can control the exposure environment, so let's say I'm thinking young autistic person, can we get them in a workplace environment and we can scale up or down the sensory inputs because it's virtual reality. So the sound, the visual, the lights, whatever that might be, to give them that exposure and tolerance and experience. So then they have something to say they have experience. So anyway, did a research degree, which the TLDR version, Amanda, was this research is probably 5 years too early, come back later. But maybe this might work.
There's a lot of changes in that space, isn't there? The VR, like I think more just in very recent years, it's really starting to exponentially take off.
Absolutely.
But you were ahead of the curve there. Maybe that made it more challenging, obviously, for you as well.
Yes, definitely. And then I left that role, finished my degree, and then working in private practice, I was just unsettled. I was looking for problems to solve because that's just the kind of person I am. Again, if you know, you know, maybe you're one of the crazies like I am. And I was working with this young man who had agoraphobia, couldn't leave the house. And so I thought, oh, you know what? VR's the perfect thing for this young man. Got myself all set up, was doing some therapy with him, minor stuff, because my biggest limitation at the time was access to appropriate therapeutic software, which I'm sure you can
It's still a
appreciate.
bit of a challenge.
An ongoing challenge. And so I was using things like Google Maps because, you know, it was exposure to being out of the house, which is good for this particular person. And I wanted to use it more for other clients, but I was just limited by this, you know, I was using a bit of Beat Saber and things, but really limited. So that led me to starting a digital health startup where I wanted to, I think naively, create this big thriving marketplace where you could buy and sell healthcare software easily. You can find it and select it and move on with your day, you know, in the click of a button. That was such a good experience. I had this deep dive into startup world. I learned about venture capital funding and the product market fit and the ruthless nature of this kind of fail fast technology startup world, which I absolutely loved. It did lead me to realize that that beautiful vision I had in my mind was more a solution than a solution to a problem. So that didn't end up working out, but that's okay. It was such a good learning opportunity. And then along came ChatGPT, right? Now we know AI has been around since the 50s, so I'm not saying it popped up in 2022, but it certainly touched our lives.
It exponentially increased when ChatGPT came out, didn't it?
Yeah. And the first thing I did, honestly, the month it launched, I was on there playing and I remember I was like, oh, I'll ask it to write a story about my dog. So I said, I have two dogs who are German short-haired pointers named blah and blah. Can you write a story about them doing something? And I remember reading this story, which now, if we reflected back, it was probably very poor quality, but just the capability of that very little instruction popping out this multiple paragraph story, it was just mind blown.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, I'm the kind of, I don't do well with a blank page. I have this very traumatic memory of being in primary school. And I don't know if you remember this. I don't know if they do this nowadays, but they said, I don't remember the exact details, but it was something like, all right, everybody, you've got 1 hour to write a story.
Mine
And I
goes blank.
remember I sat there for the entire hour and wrote nothing. because the minute you say to me, write something from zero, I'm out. So that's my trauma history. But then this technology that could produce this stuff, I started to think, I think there's a lot of good that this could do. And all along and forever, I've always been a big picture thinker. Some of the things that were haunting me, if you will, keeping me up at night at the time, were thinking about the workforce challenges we have in allied health and in broader health. Um, I had this ticking thing in the back of my mind. How do we solve this workforce challenge issue? How do we meet the needs of the people who need allied health, but we're constrained by workforce and compassion burnout and all that kind of jazz? And so I started to see this technology that maybe there's something there. And then I started playing with it in all aspects of
Yeah.
work life and started to see exactly where that is, did a bit of further study in things like building an AI agent. um, and so nowadays, very long story short, um, all of those little pieces of the puzzle of who I am and the things I love doing have kind of reconnected. And so I'm very lucky that I get to work with allied health businesses around how do we create system structures, innovations that are better, that do better, that deliver better outcomes for our clients, for our clinicians, and for our businesses. And I just love that.
And I know you've talked a lot about it. We're not just using AI for the sake of it, but what is the problem? What are the difficulties? How can we leverage AI to really make a meaningful impact, be that on clinician time or be that providing better quality services to clients? Yeah, it's just
Absolutely.
AI for the sake of it. Otherwise,
Yeah,
sometimes AI can actually just create more problems than it's worth in certain settings. So yeah, it's really important to understand, what are the difficulties? What are you trying to achieve?
absolutely. I
Yeah.
think I apologize to anyone who's heard me speak before speaking, but this is something I talk about a lot. Whilst I do love technology, I sometimes also suffer from shiny object syndrome. I think
I'm a little bit like that as well, particularly with the VR.
I also live in the world where the number one important thing to me is impact. How are we having impact, and how do we make things better? And if AI is the tool that solves your problem or the problem in this area in your practice, then great, let's use it. But sometimes it's not the tool. And as much as I love the tech and the shiny objects, sometimes I'm not here to hype it because it's not perfect. It is not the answer to everything. And I think I was just reflecting with someone earlier this week that that's exactly what we've actually seen in the market, right? We had this, it was novel and then it was hyped. And we've almost had a little bit of a deflation in that bubble of hype at the moment, um, because it's actually not necessarily delivering exactly what we thought it would originally. Doesn't mean it won't get there, but at the present time, it's not quite where we'd like it to be.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's not still doing great things, but
Yeah. But I think you're right as far as the initial was that kind of hype, the novelty factor. I've used it as well. Like the
yeah,
first thing
it's
I
same
did was getting it
thing.
to write poetry to play around with it. I'm using it more and more, obviously, in my own clinical practice. So, with clients that I see pain management work. But there's also, lots more considerations and ethical considerations and privacy consider. And I think a lot more now. There's also that fear out there for clinicians about, well, what is okay to use, and what do I need to be aware of? Because with new technology also comes the new challenges, and you can't just jump in and necessarily start using things without actually thinking about, well, what are the consequences? What is going on here? What are some of the I guess challenges you're seeing that clinicians are, what are they worried about? What are some of the common things you're hearing?
Yeah. I Before challenges, I just want to say, although we said it's not doing exactly what we'd hoped it would do, there
It
are things
isn't.
it's doing well,
Yeah.
right? And we both use it for this. There are some elements of admin tasks that we can use AI to assist us with. Definitely, by far, it has made a huge impact on documentation, um, information synthesis, learning, reflective practice, supervision, there are some many things doing well. So I think we should acknowledge that
Oh,
before we.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I remember, do you want to talk about those things first, or do you want to
I
talk
think
about,
we've covered it now.
yeah, yeah. Let's talk about some of the challenges because I think they're the things that, there's a lot of clinicians who aren't necessarily tech savvy. There's suddenly all these AI products on the market, and they're like, well, whoa, what do I do? Yeah, what are some of the common things you're hearing, I guess, or the
Yeah.
fears?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is that whilst our initial responses, yours and mine, we just described having that, whoa, this is magic kind of moment.
Yeah.
It's not magic. It is computer science. It is making sense, right? There are ways that this technology is working. I'm not going to bore anyone to tears by explaining it, but it's not a wizard with a magic wand, right? It is processing, predicting for the most part. And so with that comes risks that there are hallucinations or errors. There's risks, you know, how many risks? Privacy, I suppose, is the most important risk that we need to think about because to do the better job that these tools can do, they need more context.
Yeah.
Now, as health professionals, as you know, not just ethically and morally, we have a legal obligation to keep health data identifiable and personal health information safe and secure. A legal responsibility, not just a nice to have, but an absolutely essential. And so there is a fine line between giving these tools sufficient context, do a good job that actually helps you, versus accidentally breaching confidentiality. In the very early days of ChatGPT, I don't know if you remember this, but there were stories that someone had put something in, I think it was business information, and it had spat that information out verbatim to somebody else, which it's not doing that exactly anymore. But if we think about that as the most rudimentary example of the problem, then you think about the consequences of that, right?
Mm.
So somebody's personal health information, some identifiable information, where they live, what their disability is, what their functional capacity is, what their life looks like, their living situation, like this can have absolutely catastrophic consequences. And so we need to just be really careful with privacy. It is complex. As we talked about,
Absolutely. Mm.
the tool market hasn't matured so much so that we have all these secure health tools that do everything we need yet. And so we are still relying on tools like your ChatGPT or your Claude or whatever, um, and they are not built for health data. In fact, every few months something goes wrong with mostly ChatGPT, and they have to program in like, don't give medical advice.
Yeah.
Um,
But
because
interesting they're moving in that way. And I mean, isn't, I think from what I read, like the number one reason people use AI now is for health advice, which
yeah,
one is very interesting, but also it's got ramifications for how we work with people because they're getting a lot of their information from ChatGPT.
yeah,
And so, how do we work in a system that's totally changed now? It used to be, I guess, Googling things, but AI is a whole different level as far as providing advice because it's like it's talking to you, like
yeah.
you know.
To me, I think
Mm.
before we get into the practical consequences of Dr. ChatGPT, I guess uh, I look at it a bit like, well, if the number one use is now personal health coaching for, a very
Mm.
broad term, I think the term they actually use, the category was health and well-being or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, if that's the number one use, then what are we doing as a system, as a sector, as a profession, as a discipline that isn't meeting the needs of the people? And I think
Mm.
that's where I see the opportunities to say, well, why are people being pushed to these tools and what could we do better to meet their needs so that they don't need to be pushed to these tools, even though there will always be people and places that use different things. But then, yeah, then there's the challenge, I guess, and the consequences of, well, what if those tools give poor advice? We did
Yeah.
see someone in 2025, I think it was, who took their own life.
Yeah.
They were encouraged by an AI tool. We've seen several people go into an AI tool kind of psychosis because they've expressed possibly intrusive or inaccurate thoughts, and the AI models have encouraged them to further deep dive down that rabbit hole. doing more harm than helping.
Yeah.
And then you have the clinicians that are sort of being faced with, oh, but the AI told me this, or chat told me blah, 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 which I think is a good thing in some ways. We want educated, informed consumers. We want to challenge our clinicians because we want the best outcome. So we need to treat it a bit like Dr. Google rather than sort of demonizing, oh, this is so annoying. I think it's an opportunity to demonstrate how you as a clinician are different to generic information coming out of an AI tool.
And also, I guess then, the opportunities for health sector to be offering secure AI with, much more inbuilt clinical guidance and things like that, they can offer similar. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of use where people are using AI because they can't get in to see a doctor or they can't get
Correct.
in to see someone and they're quite worried. So they're asking ChatGPT. And I have to admit, I have done the same thing.
Oh, you know that I have
I think
to.
I reckon probably everybody has. So I think the AI offers a lot of opportunities because it in some ways I think it does provide some really good information. But equally, if you don't know how to prompt it, and as a clinician, when it's giving me stuff, I'm also applying that clinical reasoning to it as well, like and where is it getting its sources from, and all of that kind of stuff. But the average person probably doesn't do that. So, they're more likely susceptible to misinformation or going down rabbit holes and things like that as well. So, yeah, I guess it just opens up opportunities and potentially lots of issues as well. So it's an interesting world that we're currently in.
Yeah. I think um, probably the most fascinating thing I'm seeing at the moment, and I had a conversation with a friend yesterday who has a young kid who was kind of grappling with this, but exactly what you just described, right? The key tool to using these tools properly, human tool, is critical analysis, right? Is
Mm.
critiquing the output and saying, does that make sense? Has it come from a reputable source? All those things we actually learned at uni, right?
Yeah.
About critiquing the sources of information, much the same. And, when you and I use these tools maybe for our personal health, we still have our healthcare
Yeah.
clinician kind of critique overlay. Not everybody, is fortunate to have that. The irony, though, is that the research is showing us that the first skill that tends to drop off from AI overuse is critical analysis. So, the most important skill for using this tool is also the most impacted skill as a consequence of using the tool, which I don't know what we do about that, but I find it fascinating.
Yeah, it's kind of like relying on AI to come up with your answers. So you're not actually doing that kind of thinking and so on. And I think it's trying to find ways, I think, where you've got to make sure that you're actually, you are critiquing it because otherwise people can get kind of, I guess, lazy. Like, oh, well, AI can do that for me. I don't even need to think about that.
Yeah.
But then you can trust it too much as well. So I think, yeah, it's
Yep.
important. I think, yeah, they are doing studies now on people who are using AI all the time. Their like cognitive capacity and things like that is actually reducing, like their, yeah, executive
Yeah.
functioning and things like that because they're relying on a tool to do it for them, which is not, yeah, not helpful. It should be something that supports you, a bit like a calculator. It's not, it's just a tool that helps you, it's not
Yeah.
doing everything for you, doing the thinking for you.
Yeah. And I think the other challenge of that is the way that the tools always prompt you for another thing, right? So it's creating a level of dependency,
Does,
but
yeah.
also in its nature, right? It's natural language processing. So it's trying to produce the most perfect sounded language. And we humans have a bias that when something sounds good, it must be true. And
Yes.
so there's multiple things that are sort of eating at our defenses, if you will, when we're using these tools. And so actually, we need to keep our defenses up without getting in the way of supporting us to create better things or be more efficient or whatever it is. It's quite a hard balance. And I completely understand why some people refuse to use the tools.
Yes. Going forward, I guess, I mean, there are a lot of challenges, but a lot of opportunities. What excites you most? Like, what do you, think is in the horizon in terms of AI that's got you most excited?
Yeah. I think part of the deflation of the balloon of hype, I suppose, is frustrating for me because I think where we're at with the technology now is it's great for documentation, it's helping with a bit of admin, which is all wonderful. absolutely important, wonderful, but not terribly exciting. I
Mm.
think the things that excite me, if we go back to what we first started with, is how do we get better outcomes? How do we do better? How do we create a better experiences for clients with allied health? How do clinicians have more fulfilling careers with less burnout? And how do businesses be thriving, viable businesses, right? Those are the things that excite me. So things like data aggregation. So if you're my client, I've got your wearables data, all the stuff you put in your chatbot, everything you told me, plus everything we did in the session. And all of that data can very quickly be aggregated to help inform me to make better clinical decisions. Um, I think that's low level. Technically, the tech can do that right now. It's just the tools and the safety is a challenge. I'm excited by, digital adjuncts to therapy where the tools can progress someone between sessions because they're aggregating that data, they're analyzing that the person has progressed from level 1 to 2 of whatever the thing is. And so, again, by the nature of that, we're getting better outcomes. Um, and then, of course, I think it's the how do we tie in all the different emerging technologies? So we've got AI sitting here, VR's over there, we've got brain computer interfaces over there, we've got the future, possibly quantum computing and things like that.
Mm.
So
Which will change things again, like dramatically.
how do we pull all these together for the benefit of whoever we're serving? That's what I care most about.
Yeah.
Like
I'm
text,
thinking that, yeah, that link between the VR and AI, because at the moment you're sort of reliant on, I guess, fairly generic programs that you can use. They're
yes.
not tailored to the clients, hard to adapt them. But if you actually have those linkages with AI and wearable data and stuff as well, that you can actually, if you could adapt the VR to suit that individual and where they're at and their needs, then you would get, yeah, it would much more powerful impact. So
And we know that, an hour therapy session every fortnight is not enough to make progress, right? So if the person had, let's say in that example, their own VR kit at home or rented one from you, and you've got the program for their homework set up, they could be progressing possibly every single day, automated by the tool and the AI algorithms that sit underneath
mm.
it. So that by the time they come back in a fortnight, their progress is not just 1 to 2, they've kind of gone from 1 to 4, which in some ways does us out of a job, which I think is the kind of end goal,
But,
right?
but at the end of the day, I mean, that's what we really want to do. I think a good therapist is about, well, how do you build their skills, their capacity so that they don't need you anymore? You don't want to have clients you're seeing forever. And I don't think I don't like that model where health professionals sometimes seem to just see a client forever.
Right.
But it's like, I want to do myself out of your job because that means the person is doing well and living their life and they don't need me. And that's
Yeah.
awesome. And, there's always more people who need help. So I'd rather
Yeah.
build their capacity and they manage themselves and don't need me.
Right.
And
And
we can't
I
afford
think
to be hanging on to people like that either because there's so many others that need help that aren't getting it.
And that's exactly it. I think one of the other impacts of this technology, if we do it right, of course, is that equity and accessibility to healthcare. There
Mm.
are some regions in the world that don't have access to allied health. There was a country at the WFOT conference, I can't remember which country it was, but they have 10 OTs in the entire country, right?
Yeah, I
And
know
that's
there's
probably not
parts
the
of
lowest.
Africa. I was chatting to an OT over there, and I think she said there was like similar. There was only like a dozen in their whole country for
Which,
millions.
you know, some countries have different disciplines and different scopes of practice, of course. That might be part of the challenge. But I think the core issue is that whilst we are from a relatively wealthy Western nation, even in our country, there are parts of a community that don't have access to anything.
Yeah, particularly rural areas and often low socioeconomic areas as well. There's often, in general, less health professionals there.
Exactly.
So
And so if
access
we
can be
can
difficult. So much inequality across Australia. So, yeah.
adjunct therapy with digital tools that can adapt in real time to how the person is going, and we can get the hell out of their lives.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
no, I
that's
agree.
best.
I
And
mean,
so,
myself, like, because I work in the pain space, so I'm doing a lot of work with people who've got persistent pain. But I find, I mean, 1 in 5 people experience chronic pain. Yet there's very limited services out there and very small numbers of clinicians truly trained in pain management. So there's such a massive gap.
Yeah.
So, I've been trying to think about, well, how do I target more people or how do I help more? Because I see
You
people
scale your
struggling
impact.
with, yeah, if they actually got some of that support, and it's not necessarily a huge amount, but it's, education support in a way that's meaningful for them. But how do we find a way to deliver that on a broader scale so that, we can help more people? So there's less people with chronic pain who are, really, really struggling and becoming disabled with it. So I feel like there's a big gap there. So I'm kind of curious, yeah, how AI or what things I could do to try and, I guess, fill some of that gap.
Yeah. And this is probably something we haven't talked about. One of my favorite parts of this technology, right, is that the ability to build solutions to problems you see in everyday practice is now accessible. I can jump in an AI tool right now as we're talking, and within 2 minutes have the first draft of an app built.
Yeah, that's amazing,
And
isn't
I'm
it?
not saying we all want to build apps, but the point is, and I'm not saying that that app is safe to go to market straight away. Absolutely. Probably
It's
no
not that
privacy,
simple. Yeah.
right? The point is, though, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you would have had to invest in a software development team and probably a product design team. That's hundreds of $1,000s up front before you even get to version 1. Whereas now, within, let's call it a day, couple hours, I could have version 1 drafted,
Having a prototype.
a minimum viable product, an
Yeah.
MVP. And
Yep.
so it's now creating a world, and this again is something I love, where clinicians can be entrepreneurs more accessibly. That's a word. So building solutions to our problems are now more accessible. We don't have to wait for the big tech companies to build something and then it filters to medicine, then nursing, then 10 years later filters through to allied health, square peg, round hole. We
Yep.
can go and build those solutions right now. And to me, again, the consequence of that is wow, more accessible
Absolutely.
therapy, more problems being solved, more realistic problems being solved means better outcomes yet again.
Yeah, no, I think it's exciting because I think it's been something that's hard for clinicians to get involved in that space previously. And also it means you've got tech companies coming up with products, selling it to consumers, whereas the other way around, we're, working with consumers, we understand what the issues are, and then we're getting products developed that really meet those needs.
Yes.
I feel like there's a lot of those developers aren't necessarily engaging with consumers and with clinicians to really understand that real world experience and what's truly going to help. So being able to influence that, I think, is amazing. And I guess having that, yeah, prototype or something you can do yourself, then you can take it to that next level if But I think it's good opportunity for clinicians to be more entrepreneurial in that space.
Yes. Having said that, small caveat.
Yeah.
Not everyone should be an entrepreneur, not
No.
everyone, right?
No. But
And
do you feel, I was just going to say, because you like all the startup stuff and you've had a lot of development in that, you've probably had a lot of experiences a lot of other clinicians haven't had. I kind of feel like maybe in the OT space that is something missing. Like there's a lot of OTs who potentially would be entrepreneurial and do some amazing things, but they're not having the training or sometimes the confidence to know how to proceed with that. Where I think, coaching and startup ventures and things like that can really help empower those skills. And
and Amanda, I've seen countless clinicians sink hundreds of thousands of dollars into a product before they've even got a piece of feedback from their intended customer. And then they
wow.
launch to market and wonder why no one's paying them for their product. And, rule number one in that world, but also in any business, is what problem are you solving and does your market want the product, solution, whatever it is, and will they pay you for it?
Yeah, that's
The
right.
answer is no. You need to stop and rethink, right? And that's the trap I see clinicians fall into. They're like, oh, this thing would be amazing. And let's be honest, it would be amazing. But jumping straight into build before you validated the market for your product even exists is the quick way to sink in a whole lot of money and going nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is exciting. There are definitely speed bumps that you should approach with caution along the way. But yeah, I think the accessibility of those opportunities has never been better.
Yep.
And I could waffle on about that all day long, but I won't.
So, with regards to, I guess, some of the AI stuff that's out there now, so for maybe people listening who are not using a lot of AI or a bit nervous, what are some maybe starting points for them or some practical ways they could start exploring it? What would you recommend?
Absolutely. Well, I would, firstly, we've already talked about what step one was for us, right? Do that. Go and do something that has nothing to do with client data. Write a story about your dogs, rewrite your personal bio, you know, ask it for design principles for your lounge room, whatever, right? Maybe
Play
don't
with
take the photo,
it.
but just go and play. Start with something low risk, small. And to quote our friend Karen Jacobs, you know, we learn best when we're playing. So go and play, explore, have fun, and understand the limitations and capabilities. That's kind of step one.
Yeah.
I think from then, it's really thinking about the problem. What problem are you solving? And a great example I talk about is report writing, right? For a lot of OTs in particular, report writing is the biggest bane of their existence in the current
Absolutely.
market in Australia. However, for me personally, I have a very small caseload. I write maybe one report every couple of months. And so for me, report writing is not a pain point that I need to personally go and solve. If you're writing 10 reports a month that are medico-legal length and whatnot, then yeah, report writing is a pain point to solve for you. And so not everyone needs a report writing AI software, is kind of my point. Some people do, some people don't. So think about the problems.
Yeah.
And when we stop and think about problems, I don't want you to think, oh, what are the pain points? Like literally feel it. Where does Where in my day do I feel infuriated, frustrated, repetitive, bored out of my brain? What do I hate the most? Start there.
What are you procrastinating with and really don't want to
What's
do?
been on the to-do list for 3 weeks and hasn't been
Yeah,
resolved, right? So
yeah.
start there. And then once you've got that kind of down pat or modeled, if you will, then you go and find the solution to that problem. And to be honest, there might not be a solution right now, but there might be. Then you've got to think about the safety protocol. So what are the privacy policies of that tool? What is my human oversight? What is my critical thinking? What are my safety features, etc.? So hopefully the process is play and explore, find the problems, don't focus on the hypey tools, then put in your governance layers before you do high risk stuff. I think that's probably keeping it simple. They're my
Yeah,
three
I think that's
steps.
probably a good start. I think in general, like just that playing, even like when I started using VR therapy, like I started with myself first and, just learning how to use it, what games are out there, or how it might be used, or how I might be able to adapt it. So it was a lot of me just playing around with it.
How
So having
sensitive are the hand
fun.
movements?
Yeah, and
I
exploring,
think
what can I adjust in there and how do I
you'll
match?
love this.
Yeah,
First time I played with AR, with VR, which was before the Quest era. So like
yeah,
we're talking
quite a while ago.
10 plus years
Before
ago.
I
Um,
started.
this was a HTC Vive, which I'm not even sure is even on the market now. Anyway, you had to be fully hooked up. It wasn't wireless. I walked straight into the bedroom mirror or the office mirror, and my husband had to like come and like catch me. So that was a really good learn, catastrophic, also hilarious. No injuries occurred. But also, if you think about the learn from that, is that then I'm thinking, okay, well, if I'm with a client and there's some safety risks, maybe we want to make sure we're sitting down for that task. So by way of playing, you're
Yes.
learning the boundaries of safety and implementation at the same time.
Absolutely, because
And
you're
stay
learning
away
from
from
your own
mirror
mistakes
doors.
often. Yeah, I have hit a wall before and I've scratched myself badly. I was doing body combat and I must have been, I had my, my thumbs out, and they were doing it like these low ones, and I had short, like it was summer, I had shorts on, and I've gone like that, and I've just like scraped along, made my leg bleed. I
Yes.
kept playing still because it's so motivating being in there. But yeah, no, you learn from your own mistakes.
Meanwhile, you're bleeding
Yeah,
and
I got out of it. I'm like, oh, no wonder that hurt. Yeah, look what I did. That was quite funny.
goodness
That's
me.
probably the only main injury I've had. Yeah.
That's enough.
When I guess with regards to the VR, because I struggled a bit at the beginning to work out, like, well, how do I use this in therapy? It was a lot of just trial and error, a lot of surfing the net, trying to like find other resources and evidence. And so what I did after that, I sort of started the occupational therapy VR community of practice. So that's been going for, oh, I don't know, might even be a couple of years now.
Yeah, maybe
Um,
2 years.
yeah, I think so. Time just flies by really quickly. So if anyone listening is an OT and interested in VR, yeah, I have an OT VR community of practice. So we have sessions every few months, and we've got a Facebook group and a WhatsApp group, and it's just an opportunity really to share resources with each other and support each other in our innovative space where there isn't a lot of stuff that's there to help us. And I don't really want everyone to have to start from scratch like I did, because I felt like it did take a long time. So, and we have a like a website as well where we've got lots of resources on there as well. So just hopefully we'll save OT's time so they can actually, just sort of got some ideas where to start and have a bit of a play and then work out how it might work in their clinical area. I mean, I use it in pain management, but also like emotional regulation, mental health, skills building, like getting people motivated to move and
Yeah.
physical activity and graded activity. So I use it in a variety of ways, but I am excited by the prospect of when we start integrating more of the wearable stuff that becomes more real, like it's clunky at the
Yeah.
moment, and AI, so we can tailor stuff and having more clinicians develop VR apps so they are actually more applicable to the clients that we see. That would be pretty cool because it's
It
like,
would be. There's
yeah,
obviously some regulatory caveats around
there
that.
is. It's not that simple, I
Got
realize,
to
which
do
is
it
why
safe
it's not there.
yet.
Yet, yet,
There,
not there
look, there
yet.
is a market that's growing and building. It just takes time. But yeah,
Yes.
there's some really, I will never forget in the early days of using VR in therapy, I was working with a lady who'd had a stroke, and so she had limited active use of one of her upper limbs, and we actually did Beat Saber. And it was
Yeah.
fascinating because her active range of motion was very minimal, sort of like, maybe 10, 15 degrees. I will never forget. She was doing Beat Saber and she had full active range of motion. And I actually, with her permission, of course, filmed it for her and showed her afterwards. And she was mind blown that
Yeah.
using Beat Saber, she was able to get full active range and outside of VR, she couldn't. And so she made rapid progress with a, upper limb therapy program using VR that she possibly would not have made without it. It's kind
Yeah,
of
I've
like
had
mirror
similar.
box, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I've had some similar experience with clients. They can often do a lot more in VR because it's kind of tricking the brain and it's
Immersion.
fascinating. So I find it, yeah, so I find that fascinating in the pain management space. I find it really quite valuable. So because it is about how we kind of retrain the brain, and find VR offers something that you can't get through many other methods. So.
Yes.
We probably need to wrap up pretty soon. Although I could just keep talking to you for hours, I reckon. But do you want to, I guess, tell us a little bit how people can access you, some of the things that you offer, where people
Yeah,
will find
sure.
you?
Absolutely. So you can find me either on LinkedIn. I'm Jess Francis, I think, or on my website, thetrainingclub.com.au. Essentially, I work with allied health businesses of any size. So if you're a solo or even a clinician, that's okay. Really around this concept that I was talking to you about, how do we do better for clients, clinicians, and businesses, right? So that kind of spans technology, innovation, workforce, operations. They're all kind of my jams. And they all fit in together with a little bit of AI, of course, and maybe some VR and who knows what else.
Yep.
And yeah, so anyone that needs support in doing better, being better, getting better outcomes, you know, happy to help. So yes, on the website or LinkedIn, or probably speaking at some random conference somewhere.
Yep. And you've also got your allied health AI chat sessions that you
Yes.
run as well, which I've found really valuable attending. Do you want to tell?
Yes. So similarly to your VR community of practice, we have an AI in Allied Health group chat, it's called. Again, a free monthly group supervision, peer learning environment kind of thing. It's unstructured, unscripted, but no sales. That's the only rule. And so, yeah, you can also find that on the website, trainingclub.com.au, and sign up and come along monthly. And sometimes we've got a huge group and sometimes a small group. Sometimes we'll spend the entire time talking about one topic. Other times it'll
Yeah,
be,
very variable. Yeah.
yeah. So that's kind of the beauty of it. It's just like-minded people sharing their experiences, good, bad, and otherwise. And it's like that third place kind of concept.
Yeah.
The extra place you can go without any expectations on you, which I quite appreciate.
Yeah. No, I found it really, really useful. So I'd recommend to any allied health interested in that. It's been good for me to kind of stay in touch with some of what's happening. Otherwise, I'm not sure how I'd be aware of it as much. So I'm much more
Yes.
aware of some of the AI and the emerging things because there's some definitely, including yourself, there's some other very tech savvy people who tend to go to that group. So it's great learning from them as well. And then when you're stuck on something, they're a great, forum to just ask questions. So no, that's really cool. So with regards to the VR community of practice, so there's information on my website about that. So if you just go to beinspiredgroup.com.au, there's some details on there on how to contact me, and I can provide you all the information on how to be a part of that group. But yes, it's been awesome having you, Jess. It's always
An
great talking to
absolute
you.
pleasure.
You always
Thank you.
get me excited about stuff and ideas and how we can
I
change the world.
Well, also, I'm going to the Digital Health Festival next week,
Okay.
which is Australia's sort of biggest conference in digital health. And every time I go, I sort of get my mind expanded in a different way and more inspired in some way or another. So very excited to come back from that and share that enthusiasm
Yeah.
with you as
No,
well.
that sounds very cool. And you're also
We can change the world.
yes,
We should.
we can.
We
And you're
can.
also going to be at the OT Exchange, aren't you, as
Yes.
well,
Yep.
presenting at that, which is Gold Coast in no, Brisbane, sorry,
Brisbane. Yes.
Brisbane
So
in
I'm
June, not very far away now. I'm
doing
actually
two
going to that.
workshops
So
too.
I
I've
will
got,
get to see you in person there.
yeah,
We can
yes.
catch up, which will be really nice.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
you're in Sydney and I'm in Adelaide. So yeah, we'll take advantage of these opportunities to meet up when we can. Anyway, yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, have a great rest of your week. And
Thank you.
that's all for today. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Out of the Box OT and Health Conversations. If today's conversation sparked ideas about pain management, innovation, or using VR in therapy, you can find more resources, including information on joining the OTBR community practice, my pain management work, and mentoring for OTs over at beinspiredgroup.com.au. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn by searching for Amanda Shields. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a colleague or leave a review so more clinicians can discover the podcast. Until next time, keep thinking differently and shaping the future of therapy and healthcare.